big issue, and I think the big criticism of the budget as passed by the Senate yesterday is the increase, obviously, in expenditure for the National Assembly itself.
Yes.
And then, of course, there's the issue of recurrent expenditure still being quite high. What are your overall impressions of what we have
think
today?
it is unfortunate that the surge in recurrent expenditure at a time when we should be actually emphasizing capital expenditure. Yes, we know that oil prices have increased, but that doesn't mean it's harvest time. What they've done actually is like a harvesting of the revenues even before they begin to come in.
But is it that easy? Some might argue it's easier said than done to reduce this recurrent expenditure. Where exactly is the money going, and why do you think it's so easy to cut down?
There are two big components of the recurrent expenditure. One is salaries and special allowances. The other part is debt service. If the revenue is increasing and your deficit has actually reduced, therefore your debt service should actually go down. So I don't think debt service is a major issue. The real issue is the payments and the supplementary allowances to government officials. The size of government is just too massive. The Presidential Advisory Committee has advised the President to prune the ministries. They have 27 ministries, and I mean it's quite a. It is huge.
Okay, let's talk about the pillars of the budget as discussed by the Minister of Finance. You mentioned economic growth. You mentioned optimizing capital spending, rationalizing recurrent expenditure, and then reforms in public expenditure, and then, of course, greater prudence with regards to the management of the national financial resources. To what extent do you think this budget addresses these issues?
I'm not sure that they do. Yeah, I mean, there's no evidence. The budget is long on rhetoric but short on deliverables. The reality is that we are aware that the world oil price is up to where 100, Brent is about 114, and the question is, are the assumptions on which the budget is based, are they realistic? Number one is that the $75 per barrel price is realistic. It gives you about a 45% headroom between the budget benchmark price and the spot price. The exchange rate of 150 is not realistic. The pressure on the exchange rate is going to continue, and it's not going to stop. So I think that we need to be flexible. Obviously, we've come from 147 to 151, but we have to have some flexibility in moving forward.
Let's take a look at the deficit. 8% of GDP is what is being proposed. What impact do you think this will have on the financial markets? Because obviously they have to raise the money.
Yes.
Bond issuances are likely to increase and so forth. What do you think?
I think there's a capacity to absorb it, but I think it's actually 3.69% of the GDP.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So, I mean, it was 5% of GDP before. Now they brought it down to 3.69 because the revenues have increased. So there's a capacity, but definitely it is going to have an effect. The bond yields in Nigeria actually went up yesterday, even though inflation came down. The MPC is meeting next week, and the sense is that we are going to see some tightening and contraction because this fiscal expenditure pattern is going to overheat the economy, whether we like it or not. And I think that they have to take steps to actually rein that in.
So you're obviously concerned about that. But what about other issues like job creation? I noted from the Minister of Finance speech, you mentioned 50 billion being allocated to create jobs in urban and rural areas and through a public works program. What are expectations from such initiatives? To
be honest with you, 50 billion naira is something like about $300 million, right? For an economy which is $280 billion, $300 million is less than 2 or 3% of the total GDP. It's not going to have a significant. It's a move in the right direction, but it's not going to have a significant impact, right, on the investment multiplier. Jobs have to be created. This economy has to be driven. The public expenditure space has to be not just increase the quantity, but the quality of expenditure. The private sector has to bring in money. We have to make a determined effort to raise project finance with concessioning, partnering, and actually borrowing more aggressively to actually bridge that infrastructure gap. We cannot wait for 10 years to do it. Brazil has actually become the 5th largest economy in the world and the 4th largest capital market in the world. All of this in 15 years, less than a generation. I think it tells you that it can be done. And we have similar characteristics in terms of economic profile to Brazil.
And obviously, a lot should begin to happen after the elections.
Yes, definitely. And that's my comment on the budget is that there will be a supplementary budget after the election. So you have budget A proposed by the government, budget B as amended by the National Assembly, which you've seen yesterday, and then budget C will be the supplementary budget, which will come out in July, where there's going to be an expanded expenditure again, which will address the infrastructure gap, both in transport, in roads, railway, ports, and other areas, refineries.